The press conference room at Soldier Field hung under a suffocating cloud of defeat as Shedeur Sanders stepped to the podium following one of the most punishing outings of his young NFL career. The Cleveland Browns had just been obliterated 31-3 by the Chicago Bears, and their rookie quarterback endured a nightmarish performance, throwing 3 momentum-killing interceptions, completing barely half his passes, and absorbing 5 sacks behind an offensive line that functioned more like a revolving door than a protective unit. Yet, as Sanders settled into his chair and faced the cameras, something extraordinary unfolded, something that sharply distinguished him from the coaches and organizational voices who had spent the afternoon dodging accountability and diluting responsibility. Sanders stared straight into the lens and delivered a dose of ruthless, unvarnished honesty that immediately reverberated across the football world, leaving Browns fans asking why their 20-something quarterback appeared to possess more accountability and leadership than the entire coaching staff combined. The box score painted a picture so grim that even his most loyal supporters couldn't twist it into optimism. 18 completions on 35 attempts for a meager 177 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions that decisively flipped momentum in Chicago's favor, 5 sacks that left him battered and worn down. A passer rating of 30.3, astonishingly worse than if he had simply spiked the ball on every snap. These weren't merely bad numbers, they were historically dreadful statistics, the kind that make quarterbacks want to erase a Sunday from memory entirely. Chicago dominated Cleveland in every phase of the game. On the opposite sideline, Caleb Williams put on a masterclass, while Sanders struggled to generate rhythm, protect the football, or stabilize his offense. The contrast between the two quarterbacks was stark and unavoidable. Williams completed 17 of 28 passes for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns, appearing poised, confident, and fully in command of the Bears' offense. He made the necessary throws, avoided catastrophic errors, and looked every bit like a young quarterback finding his footing and moving decisively in the right direction. Meanwhile, Sanders appeared overwhelmed, under relentless siege, and unable to execute even foundational offensive concepts with consistency. The gulf between their performances was massive, fueling critics who questioned whether Cleveland had properly evaluated its quarterback future. But what unfolded after the final whistle, inside that press conference room filled with reporters eager for sound bites and scapegoats, revealed far more about Sanders' character than any statistical comparison ever could. When asked to evaluate his own performance and summarize how he felt about the game, Sanders didn't stall, deflect, or hide behind context. He offered a slight smile, the knowing expression of someone who understands the futility of dressing up disaster, and delivered a response that was as blunt as it was refreshing. They lost, so he didn't play well. That was it. Period. No excuses, no qualifiers, no weather talk, no protection complaints, no finger-pointing. Just pure accountability from a young quarterback who understands that wins and losses are the only metrics that ultimately matter. That moment of raw honesty stood in sharp contrast to the messaging coming from head coach Kevin Stefanski and other organizational figures who leaned heavily on familiar refrains about progress, development, and the natural growing pains of young quarterbacks. Stefanski insisted he saw improvement in both games and practice, framing a 30.3 passer rating and 3 interceptions as routine steps in a developmental arc, rather than a collapse that demanded urgent reflection. The disconnect between Sanders' brutal self-evaluation and Stefanski's sanitized explanations was glaring and deeply revealing. It highlighted a level of maturity and personal responsibility from the rookie quarterback that seemed conspicuously absent from the staff tasked with guiding him. To his credit, Sanders didn't pretend the failure rested solely on his shoulders. He acknowledged what everyone could see. The entire team played poorly. The offensive line was overwhelmed at the point of attack, offering virtually no protection and forcing him to operate under constant pressure. Jerry Jeudy endured a disastrous outing, dropping passes and running ineffective routes that directly contributed to at least one interception. The running game was non-existent, providing no balance and no relief. The game plan itself appeared mismatched to both the personnel and the circumstances. Any one of these factors could have served as a convenient explanation for Sanders' struggles. He could have leaned on them. He didn't. Instead, Sanders accepted full responsibility while recognizing the context without weaponizing it as an excuse. When specifically asked about the Jeudy drop that turned into an interception, he once again chose leadership over self-preservation. He could have clarified that the turnover wasn't truly his fault. He could have redirected criticism toward his receiver. Instead, he took the high road with striking composure. "Drops happen," he said. "He's not the type to kick a teammate while they're down." Jeudy knows the magnitude of the mistake and is already holding himself accountable. There's no value in piling on. That response tells you everything you need to know about Shedeur Sanders. He absorbed the statistical penalty for an interception that wasn't his fault, shielded his teammate from further scrutiny, and demonstrated the loyalty, self-awareness, and team-first mentality that earns trust in a locker room. In defeat, under the brightest scrutiny, he showed leadership far beyond his years. That isn't something that can be installed by a coach or drilled into existence on a practice field. It's an instinct, a core value system, a deeply rooted way of understanding accountability, relationships, and responsibility that either lives inside a person or it doesn't. Shedeur Sanders has it, and over the long arc of a career, that trait may prove more valuable than any physical tool or technical refinement he possesses. The weather at Soldier Field undeniably contributed to the offensive struggles on both sidelines, though Chicago managed those conditions far more effectively than Cleveland. Sanders acknowledged that cold weather wasn't foreign territory. He spent 2 years in Colorado, where winter bites hard, and Mississippi cools down sharply late in the season. But there's a meaningful difference between knowing you've played in the cold before and executing a complex offensive system in freezing temperatures, with swirling winds disrupting ball flight and shrinking margins for error. Sanders didn't lean on the weather as a crutch. He didn't frame it as the primary cause of his struggles. But he also didn't insult everyone's intelligence by pretending it played no role at all. What truly stood out to anyone actually watching the tape, rather than skimming box scores, were the protection failures that plagued Sanders throughout the afternoon. Film analysts like Emmanuel Acho highlighted multiple snaps where Sanders was effectively abandoned by his offensive line, with defenders crashing down on him before routes had any chance to develop. On one play in particular, Sanders stood tall as the pocket collapsed from every angle and still managed to fire a completion that showcased both arm strength and composure under fire. The issue wasn't the throw, it was the fact that he had to make something heroic just to complete a routine pass. The offensive line should have afforded him the time to progress through his reads and operate from a clean pocket. When questioned about playing behind an offensive line in constant flux due to injuries, Sanders once again refused to hide behind circumstances beyond his control. "Injuries happen," he said. "Nobody wants to be hurt." That's simply the reality of the NFL. There was no bitterness in his tone, no subtle blame shifting, just an understanding that complaining doesn't change outcomes. That perspective reveals a quarterback with the psychological framework to endure adversity without excuses or self-pity. Sanders understands that his responsibility remains the same regardless of who's blocking for him, which weapons are available, or what defensive front he's facing. Asked about the emotional swing of throwing 4 touchdowns one week and 3 interceptions the next, Sanders delivered yet another answer that exposed his mental discipline. He explained that he's the same person regardless of the stat line. His belief in himself doesn't fluctuate with touchdowns or turnovers. Each week presents the same mission: step onto the field, learn from what just happened, and be better the next time out. That emotional steadiness, the refusal to ride the volatile highs of success or sink into the lows of failure, is essential for sustained quarterback play. The moment a quarterback becomes intoxicated by wins or paralyzed by losses, consistency evaporates. Sanders' comments about facing Chicago's defense further underscored his maturity and competitive edge. He praised the Bears' scheme, acknowledged the quality of their defensive execution, and said he genuinely enjoyed the challenge because it forced him to confront his limitations. He expressed eagerness to dive into the film, to dissect what went wrong, and to extract lessons from the experience. That growth-oriented mindset, the hunger to improve through ruthless self-evaluation rather than denial, is the dividing line between quarterbacks who eventually figure it out and those who quietly fade away. Sanders isn't deflecting criticism or bristling at a bad performance. He's absorbing it and converting it into fuel. Even the brief discussion surrounding his wristband turned out to be far less dramatic than initial speculation suggested. When asked about an issue after the first 2 drives, Sanders clarified that the card simply fell out on the sideline, nothing more, no malfunction, no hidden storyline. Just a minor inconvenience that was quickly resolved. But the fact that such a trivial moment became a topic at all speaks volumes about the microscope Sanders operates under. Every snap, every gesture, every piece of equipment, every sideline interaction is scrutinized, dissected, and debated. And through it all, he continues to respond with composure, clarity, and an uncommon level of self-awareness. Dissected by media and fans desperate for explanations, desperate for a culprit, desperate for a storyline that makes the chaos feel rational. And Sanders' response to questions about Kevin Stefanski publicly reaffirming him as the starter revealed something deeper than confidence. It revealed a surprisingly advanced understanding of job security in the NFL. When a reporter suggested that Stefanski's public support should reassure him, Sanders didn't play along. He kept it brutally real. He pointed out that Stefanski said similar things the week before, and more importantly, in this league, you can lose your job at any moment. No promises are permanent. No comfort is guaranteed. But Sanders also made something crystal clear. He refuses to play football from a place of fear. Because the second you start operating scared of losing your spot, scared of headlines, scared of what people are saying, that's when you stop being yourself. And that's when your performance starts to rot from the inside out. To some people, that outlook might sound almost too calm, too casual, even reckless. But in reality, it's a sophisticated survival strategy for the most pressure-loaded position in professional sports. Quarterbacks don't thrive when they're gripping the wheel with white knuckles. They thrive when they play free, trusting their preparation, trusting their instincts, and accepting whatever outcome comes with the territory. Sanders seems to understand that elite performance is impossible when you're mentally chained to anxiety. You play to win, not to avoid getting benched. When asked what he learned most from the game, Sanders didn't rush to manufacture a neat soundbite. Instead, he emphasized the need to decompress, to let the adrenaline fade, to absorb the reality of what happened, to actually process the physical and mental toll before pretending he had all the answers. He had just finished showering and stepping into the media spotlight with barely any time to metabolize the emotional weight of a total collapse. The real evaluation, he explained, comes later, when he can watch the film, sit with coaches, and understand the full web of factors that shaped the disaster. That measured approach, that refusal to fire off hot takes, even about himself, signals a maturity that should serve him well as he develops. Then came the third down question, and Sanders delivered yet another moment of full accountability. When asked what the Bears were showing defensively in those crucial situations, he admitted they weren't doing anything exotic. They were showing what they'd shown on film. Cleveland simply didn't execute. And instead of hiding behind "we" language alone, he took ownership where it mattered, saying he needs to get the offense into better situations and get the ball out faster. That kind of self-audit, specific, honest, solution-oriented, matters. It's invaluable for a young quarterback because you can't correct what you refuse to confront. His comment about needing to decompress before evaluating everything also revealed emotional intelligence beyond his years. He understands that immediate post-game reactions are often poisoned by exhaustion, frustration, pain, and raw emotion, conditions that distort clarity. He's not going to let one disaster hijack his identity, but he's also not going to dismiss it as meaningless noise. He's going to study it, extract the lessons, and return sharper. Even within the wreckage, there were small flashes of something worth building on, like the growing connection between Sanders and Isaiah Bond. When asked about that chemistry and whether it was something to carry forward, Sanders framed it the right way. Every rep is a brick. Every snap is material. Everything is something to build on. He talked about learning different speeds, communicating more effectively, knowing when to play faster, and understanding the countless variables that shape each game. That attention to detail, this obsession with incremental progress, is exactly how talented quarterbacks evolve into great ones. Sanders also acknowledged a fundamental issue that poisoned the entire afternoon. The offense couldn't find rhythm. And when you never establish flow, when every drive feels like starting from zero and fighting uphill, execution becomes exponentially harder. Poor offensive line play, drops, no running game, questionable play calling. It created an environment where momentum was nearly impossible to generate. Sanders recognized that reality without weaponizing it as an excuse. He stated it as a fact, nothing more, nothing less. When asked about what hurt the running game more, falling behind early or the constant offensive line shuffling, Sanders didn't pretend to have a perfect diagnosis. He admitted he wasn't sure. He didn't know how to answer that cleanly. And that honesty matters too, because it shows he's not performing expertise for the cameras. But what he did know was this. He has to get the offense out of negative situations early, because quarterback play directly impacts whether the running game has any oxygen at all. That's a quarterback understanding cause and effect, not just reading a stat sheet. And this is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. While Stefanski spoke in polished language about progress and normal developmental turbulence, Sanders looked into the camera and said the simplest truth. They lost, so he didn't do good. While organizational voices tried to reframe the collapse into a learning experience, Sanders acknowledged the severity of the failure without hiding behind circumstances or shifting blame. That gap between rookie-level maturity and corporate coach messaging is exactly why Browns fans are asking the uncomfortable question, who's actually leading this team? Now the focus shifts to what comes next. Sanders has to respond, because Buffalo is an even more daunting test than Chicago. The Bills bring a stronger roster, higher stakes, and a level of pressure that doesn't allow for fragile confidence. How Sanders bounces back, whether he keeps his composure after getting battered, whether he corrects mistakes without losing his edge, will tell us more about his long-term future than any single disaster ever could. And the way he handled this loss, with brutal honesty and steady emotional control, suggests he has the internal wiring to endure the storms ahead, even if the road stays rough. So what's your reaction to Shedeur Sanders' blunt honesty compared to Kevin Stefanski's excuse-heavy messaging? Do you respect that Sanders took ownership while the coaching staff seemed to deflect? Can he rebound against Buffalo and prove he's the answer in Cleveland? Or are we seeing early warning signs that the stage is too big right now? Drop your real thoughts in the comments. Let's have an honest conversation about leadership, accountability, and what the Browns need to do next. And if you want to stay locked in on all the latest Shedeur Sanders updates, Browns drama, and everything shaking across the NFL, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. The entire NFL landscape tilted on its axis the moment Tom Brady stepped into the conversation and fired a direct warning shot at Kevin Stefanski over the handling of Shedeur Sanders. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody anticipated Brady inserting himself into the Cleveland chaos. But when he did, it detonated across the league. Brady doesn't speak casually. He doesn't offer commentary unless something matters. And the way he dissected Shedeur's mindset, poise, leadership, and that ice-cold sideline eruption sent a single, unmistakable message. Stefanski is playing with fire. Because when the greatest quarterback to ever touch a football publicly implies that a young quarterback is being mismanaged, that's not criticism, that's an indictment. A full-scale exposure of how an organization operates behind closed doors. Every hit Shedeur absorbed, every time he dragged himself off the turf, every snap he survived. People don't understand the weight of carrying an entire franchise until they've lived it. Shedeur Sanders isn't just playing football, he's fighting for a city. And nobody has the right to mock a player who keeps getting up and keeps battling the way he does. And the timing couldn't have been more explosive. Just before Brady's comments went viral, a clip of Jeffrey Simmons calling Shedeur the best was everywhere. Simmons didn't hedge, didn't whisper, didn't soften it. He said it with his chest after going head-to-head with Shedeur in one of the most intense sideline confrontations of the season. You could see it in Simmons's eyes, the respect, the recognition, like he knew exactly what kind of weapon Cleveland was sitting on and inexplicably refusing to unleash. That moment alone stirred analysts. Brady co-signing it? That's when everything snapped. Overnight, the conversation shifted. It stopped being, "Is Shedeur ready?" and became, "Why is Stefanski doing everything possible to hold him back?" Inside sources say Browns players were watching Brady's segment on their phones inside the locker room, nodding along like someone had finally said the quiet part out loud. Players who had felt silenced, unable to speak publicly, suddenly felt validated. For weeks, people inside the building had sensed the slow-burning tension between Stefanski and Shedeur, the strange play calling, the inconsistent first-team reps, the abrupt benching decisions. It all added up to something that didn't feel right. Brady naming it made it impossible to ignore. And it got even stranger. Insiders claim veteran players quietly approached staff members asking why Tom Brady seemed to understand their rookie quarterback better than the head coach did. That's insane. Imagine being a coach and hearing whispers that the GOAT sees your quarterback more clearly than you ever have. Those whispers reached Stefanski and reportedly shook him. Sources say he went noticeably silent around the facility for nearly 48 hours after Brady's comments went public. The atmosphere changed. The building felt tense, uneasy, like everyone was waiting for something bigger to drop. At the same time, the national narrative flipped instantly. Before Brady spoke, the debate was split. Some defended Stefanski, others blamed him. But once Brady weighed in, the momentum swung decisively toward Shedeur. You could feel it online, on sports talk shows, even within the Browns fan base. The confusion turned into clarity. Brady didn't just defend Shedeur, he exposed the internal dysfunction Cleveland had been trying to keep hidden. From that moment on, Stefanski had a target on his back, and everyone knew this situation was about to escalate. After Brady's warning echoed across the league, more details started leaking, breadcrumb by breadcrumb. And suddenly the picture became unmistakably clear. The friction between Stefanski and Shedeur wasn't new. It was old, and it was ugly. Reports surfaced claiming Stefanski had been cold toward Shedeur since training camp, limiting first-team reps, bristling when media asked about him, even restricting his voice during quarterback meetings. That's staggering, considering Shedeur was brought in as the future. Yet it felt like the head coach wanted nothing to do with that future. Then came the bombshell. Insiders now claim Stefanski felt threatened by how quickly Shedeur was winning over the locker room. Players said Shedeur showed leadership immediately, calling out protections, correcting routes, breaking down film like a decade-long veteran, and bringing a confidence the room hadn't felt in years. And instead of empowering that presence, Stefanski reportedly tightened his grip, shrinking the playbook, controlling reps, and reasserting authority. Then came the sideline explosion, that fiery moment where Shedeur made it clear he wasn't tolerating the nonsense anymore. Jeffrey Simmons, a certified monster in this league, said he loved it. That's when players realized the rookie wasn't afraid of politics. But after that moment, Stefanski went full defensive mode. Sources say Shedeur's practice reps were slashed the following week. The script was altered to restrict his strengths. Everyone noticed, players, coaches, even executives. The tension became suffocating, so thick, insiders claim you could feel it halfway down the hallway. That's why Brady's segment hit like nuclear fallout. He didn't just talk talent, he talked mentality, composure, readiness, and the danger of sabotaging a quarterback with star-level potential. Around the league, players started speaking out, subtly. Cryptic posts about coaches suppressing greatness, former Browns players liking the clips. The front office panicked, realizing the issue had gone public in the worst possible way. Some analysts tried to soften it, claiming Stefanski just wanted Shedeur to earn it. That narrative evaporated the moment Brady spoke. When the most respected quarterback in NFL history says the kid is ready, the debate ends. Pressure crashed down on Stefanski immediately. Rumors swirled that Jimmy Haslam himself demanded answers. Through all of it, Shedeur stayed silent. No clapbacks, no interviews, no passive-aggressive posts. He moved like someone who knows his time is coming and doesn't need to explain himself. That silence earned Brady's respect even more and made Stefanski look even worse. Cleveland felt unstable, volatile, like something was about to break. And everyone knew the next move Stefanski made could determine whether he kept his job or lost it overnight. After Brady's warning rocked the league, the Browns organization scrambled internally, and that's when word leaked of a deep divide inside the building. Some coaches stood with Stefanski, but a growing number of assistants and younger players were firmly behind Shedeur. The tension reached a boiling point. Sources say one offensive assistant nearly walked out of a meeting after Stefanski dismissed feedback about tailoring the offense to Shedeur's strengths. Whispers spread that control was slipping. All because Stefanski refused to adapt for the rookie the entire football world could see was the future. And that's where things get even wilder.